Welcome back to What's Next with Lacey, the podcast where I interview young professionals about their career journey so far. I am thrilled to introduce this week's guest, the brilliant Liz, a TV writer currently working on a major streaming hit. While we will be keeping the name of the show under wraps to respect her anonymity, let's just say that Liz is a superstar and an icon in the making, and we will be seeing much more of her work lighting up our screens as her career unfolds. So on that note, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Liz. Liz, welcome to What's Next. Thank you so much for joining.
I'm so happy to be here. This is so exciting.
You are currently working as a staff writer for TV, which is very exciting, and I think one of the coolest jobs that someone could have. It is crazy to think that the words, character, a plot line that was once just like in your head is made into content that millions, and in your case, millions of people can watch, are watching.
Yes.
So I'm so excited to dig into it all. But I first want to ask, what did it feel like to get your very first episode of TV made and out there for people to watch?
Oh my God. To your point, I think I never realized like the power of being a writer until that moment happened, where I was in the writer's room. It was my first day being staffed, and I wanted to be really prepared and have something to say if the showrunner looked at me. So I'd put together this packet of like pitches and ideas. And one of the ideas came from me just Googling, like, what are some pretty things in this area? And I pitched it, and the showrunner loved it and assigned me that episode, which was crazy. And then suddenly the whole crew had to travel to this area. It was like people taking time out of their lives and like schlepping this equipment to this area, all because I had done this weird Google search. And then on the day my episode aired, we are on streaming. I'll say no more than that. But the day my episode aired, I like woke up that morning and I was like, oh my God, it's Christmas morning. Not actually, but it felt that way. And I like clicked onto the episode and I saw my name and I got like emotional because it was the end of this really long journey where I had been a PA for so long and I had been a writer's assistant for so long. And there were so many days that were like, will this ever happen for me? Is this worth it? Is getting this coffee spilled on me and in my car worth it? But then in the end, it like was. And that's such a nice thing that all of it had amounted to something. And that like my mom was going to see my name on TV and that like my aunt was going to see my name on TV. I felt so proud.
For all those who are writers' assistants or office PAs right now, to know that it does actually feel like all of that work was worth it.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure a lot of people will be very, very happy to hear that. So let's go into the nitty gritty of it all, of being a writer for TV.
Oh my God. I still can't believe that that's me. That's wild.
It is you. It is you. Believe it. You are here on this podcast talking about it. I don't know what makes it more real. I mean, having your name actually as a credit makes it real, but like being on this podcast and talking about it definitely makes it real.
This is a VIP podcast, or just VIP, very important podcast.
Why, thank you. And that is why you're a writer. So let's start with, what is the life cycle of a TV project from the perspective of a writer? Mm-hmm. You're currently on a show, it just got picked up again. So like, how does it work? When are you brought on? When do you end? What does that look like?
Yeah. So we're brought on probably about like 3 months before the start of production. And every show works differently, but my boss tends to like to write kind of while we're in production to see, you know, how things are feeling on set, if anything. I mean, we shoot a lot on location. So if there's anything about the city that brings up a fresh, cool idea. So some shows write in their entirety before production even starts. But for us, we brought on about 3 months before. We come into the room on the first day and we do what I call, what do we owe? Where do we go? So we talk about kind of what we owe from last season. What's the cliffhanger we left off on? What are like the open threads of the story? And then where do we want our characters to end at the end of the season? And how do we go from what we owe to where we go? So that's kind of how we start. And in the beginning, it's like extremely blue sky. And we're just kind of talking about, you know, thematically, what did we have our character learn last year? And what do we want them to learn this year? And how do we kind of incrementally inch our way towards that? And what are some like big touchstone moments? This year, we knew we wanted to bring, maybe a new love interest in, or something that would shake up the world and take our character to a new place. So we're like, when do we introduce that person so it feels new, but not so late in the season that it feels rushed? And how do we like create those touchstone moments? And we knew that we wanted to have, maybe a birthday episode or a holiday episode or a whatever. So that's kind of how it starts. And we start super broad, and then we kind of like whittle our way down until we kind of have the ideas for the first episodes and go from there.
Are you on a project then for 3 months? Like what happens when production starts? You mentioned that you're still writing. So then are you on a project for the 3 months, for the 6 months?
It depends writer to writer. So the producer writers get to go to set and usually will kind of like supervise set for the entire production. So those people are on for the full 6 months. Typically, a writer at my level would have a contract for like 14 weeks. Mine is 20 weeks, luckily. So then at the end of the 20 weeks, the showrunner will decide, do I want to extend this person? Will they get to come to set for their episode? Usually producer level writers get to go to set for their episode. So that adds an additional like 2 weeks to their time. Maybe there will be a break in between, but I've luckily been on for 20 weeks and have gotten to go to set as well. So I'm definitely lucky in that way.
So then going back to the writer's room, what does a day in the writer's room look like? How long are you sitting there? Do you have breaks? Are you writing together, or are you sent home to write and then come back?
Our day starts at 10:30. Usually there's about a half hour of bullshitting and like coffee drinking. So we really get into it in earnest at about 11. For our room, we don't really take a lunch break. Lunch is brought in and we continue to pitch while we eat, which always makes me feel so bad for the writer's assistant because they're taking the notes of the day, the minutes of the room. So it's hard for them to like take a bite of their food while typing and trying to catch everything. And that's not every day, but it is most days. So shout out to writer's assistants. That's incredibly difficult. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we're kind of sitting at the room just all day from like 10:30. Our boss usually likes to cut out by like 5:30, which I mean, if we're really on something and we're hammering out the final details of this idea we all feel really excited about, sometimes we'll stay later, like 6:37, but that's rare.
That's a lot of time to be constantly creative. In most jobs, at least there's downtime, like you're filling in an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, but like you're constantly on. Do you get exhausted?
I think in the first couple of days, it's kind of like the first days of going back to school. You know what I mean? Where like your first week of back to school, you're like, this is fucking exhausting. I had to listen to people speak all day. But then after the first week, you're like adapted to it. But I also will say, I think my boss is aware of that and is also feeling that as well. So certainly on the first day, we'll have a half day and we'll just kind of kick around some of the like, what do we owe from last season? Who are our characters again? And then it's kind of early. We'll go out to lunch or something. He likes to do a slow ramp up. And then by the second week, we're really like in earnest doing it.
Obviously, you are spending some time pitching ideas. There's multiple writers in this room. Obviously, not all your ideas are going to get taken, or not all of your writing is going to be like loved and you'll get notes. How do you handle that as a writer?
At first, not well. I won't lie to you. I think my first season, I had just been promoted out of being an assistant. And when you're an assistant, you really want to like have the answers for your boss all the time. And you want to solve the problem for your boss all the time. So when you're a staff writer, suddenly you go from being the center of your specific universe. Because like as a writer's assistant and script coordinator, you have so much responsibility and you're aware of everything happening. So it feels like there's so much noise and then it's suddenly quiet. And that is a really weird feeling. And you keep wanting to like have all the answers, solve all the problems. So I think in the beginning as a staff writer, I maybe pitched too much because I wanted to solve the problem. And I was like eager to still be the best assistant ever. But then I suddenly realized I would be pitching and my boss was just kind of like, to a lot of my ideas. And at first I took it super personal and I was like, oh my God, he hates everything that's coming out of my mouth. He must hate me. But then I was kind of like, my job isn't necessarily to like jump on every problem. It's to jump on the problem when I have the right solution and learning what the difference is. So that was a very hard learning curve for my first season. And I think maybe even a little bit into my second one. But I think as you go on, you learn it's better to have fewer pitches that are the right ones instead of just trying so hard all the time. So it was hard at first, but it's a learning curve.
So you mentioned earlier that you were very lucky to be on set during your episodes. So what does that even look like as a writer? Because obviously, like, you've written the script, you're done now kind of creatively, right? It's like the director and then obviously the showrunner. So how do you navigate that? What does it look like to be the writer on set when they're filming the words you wrote?
It's the fucking best. Okay, so and it can be boring sometimes too. Okay, so this is why I would always say it's better to be a TV writer than a film writer, because as a film writer, once you finish your script and maybe the studio pays for you to do, like a second step and like do a revision, whatever, you hand it off to them. And that is the end of your responsibility. Then that's where the director takes over and it really becomes like their project. And I think that's why film directors are such household names, as opposed to like not all film writers, unless you're like Aaron Sorkin, are household names, right?
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of us prefer that way, honestly. I think the anonymity is actually quite nice. But when you're a TV writer, you're with the project from start to finish, from like conception to the cut. And so you're on set with the director, and really your opinions are of equal value on set. So like if an actor is having like a weird line reading of a joke, or like maybe the intention of the joke is getting lost, you can say to the director, it's really for the director to communicate directly with the cast, but you say to the director, hey, so-and-so is reading the joke like this. Actually, the emphasis, or like not line readings, that's not what you want to do, but you want to make sure the tone and the meaning are coming across. So if they're saying it in a way, or they're not understanding the joke, you're like, this is what it means. I think it should be kind of more like this. Or if if a line is like really a tongue twister and they're having a hard time saying it, you're there to kind of judge the line so that the intention is the same, but it's like easier for delivery, or it hits harder, or whatever,
Yeah.
So you have good control and creative power. And then the director sends you a cut of the episode. I mean, they send it to the showrunner, but my showrunner is really lovely about like sending it to the writer too and seeing if we all have notes, So you kind of like get a say in the cut a little bit too, and say, hey, I think we had a better cut of this. Or like in one episode, they input a stock video of an image that I felt like gave away a later punchline. So I was like, I think we should remove this image because it's spoon feeding what's going to happen too much later. And then they removed it, which was cool.
What is the proper career trajectory for a writer? Is it common that you stay on a show and get promoted through it? Are you moved around? Is that kind of up to you and what you want in your career?
So the levels are, the entry level writer is a staff writer, which is what I am, although I am about to get bumped to the next level. Very exciting.
Yay!
The next level up is story editor, then executive story editor, then co-producer, then producer, then co-executive producer, then executive producer. So it's kind of like any company where there's a hierarchy and a ladder to climb. And also, like many other companies, sometimes if you chess piece across different shows, it helps you rise faster. Although there is comfort in staying on the same show, which is what I've done because I'm very familiar with the showrunner and, his likes and dislikes, and the other writers on the show I like and trust, And so if I'm like, oh, I think I want to do this with the script, does it make sense? Before I show it to the big boss, there are people I trust, to give opinions. And these are people I've been with since I was a PA. So I trust them very much,
Yeah. So beyond just like having good episodes, is there anything else you can do to be promoted from one level to the next?
In my case, it's in your contract. So what happened for me was I signed on to be a staff writer. When I was an assistant, they were like, would you like to be promoted? And I said, yes, please, so much. And they gave me a contract where I was staffed for season whatever and optioned for the next 2 seasons. Meaning if they liked my work well enough, they had it's called first position. So if I run another show, they get priority. No matter what, I go back to that show.
Right.
So they optioned me for the next 2 seasons of the show, should they get picked up. And in the last of those 2 seasons in my contract, it said I would then be bumped up to the next level with a corresponding pay raise, which is so happy. Per the WGA, that like each level has a minimum wage that they make. So once you get bumped, you make the minimum for that title, if that makes sense. Am I explaining it clearly? I can't tell anymore.
No, that totally makes sense. Absolutely. What is the general like overall dynamic with the showrunner? You mentioned this is their vision, this is their, TV show, and you're like executing that. So how does that relationship work? I mean, I'm sure it depends on kind of who your showrunner is, but are they sometimes like hands off? Are they hands on?
I will say our showrunner is very hands on. He's in the writer's room every day. And when we pitch, we're really pitching to him, because the show is his vision. It's his taste. That's what it is. Like TVL really is subjective. It's about whose taste is setting the tone of the TV. And if that taste aligns with what audiences like. So my showrunner's taste, I think, really does appeal to audiences. He's had many successful shows. So I think he really knows what people want to see. So when we're pitching ideas for the episodes, we are pitching to him. We're saying like, what if our character did X? And he'll either say, yeah, totally. Or like, no, I don't think that makes sense. So he's really hands-on. The good news too, is that I do think some showrunners are maybe more hierarchical than others. So he's very much a good idea can come from anywhere. So when I was a writer's assistant, I pitched an idea that got in. Or on a different show, when I was a writer's assistant, I like pitched punch-up jokes for scripts that got in. So he's very hands-on and he's setting the tone, but there is a lot of room to pitch and give ideas. Just learning like the right balance of when you're doing too much or too little, and it's really reading the nuance of the room and the vibe of the room, which is an art that you have to learn.
I want to talk about like outside your show. You are spending this time on the show, but obviously you are a writer. Writers are working on other projects at the same time. So is that what you're doing when you're not on a show? Are you just constantly writing?
If I were a diligent, good kid, yes, that is what I would be doing. Previously, when I was an assistant, I bounced from show to show to show to show with my boss. So it felt like there was never a break. Now, my boss only really has one show going at this time. So in theory, yes, I should be writing all the time, every day. And the really amazing people do. This hiatus, because it's been a longer one, I did write a pilot. And that should be every hiatus. I should be like writing something new or like a movie or something. So this hiatus was one where I was actually a good kid and did it.
Do you feel just a constant pressure to be writing and churning out content?
Yes, all the time. I always feel guilty if I'm not writing something or like actively working on it. And some days you can't because life gets in the way and you have appointments and things happening in your life. Some days there's a good justification for why it hasn't happened. But on the days where I like don't actually have that much going on, I'm like, I should be doing things and I'm not. Because normal people who are not in our insane industry work every day, Monday to Friday. And like, I think those of us who are really good and driven treat it that way, that regardless of what's happening, regardless if I'm staffed, this is my job Monday to Friday. So my goal for this upcoming year is to be more like that. Now that I've finished this pilot and it feels so good that it's done, Is that
what like motivates you? Is that pressure to churn out content, or is it also just like your love for writing that's motivating you to be spending your time writing all the time?
The truthful answer of this is like, I love being a writer, but writing is so hard. And like, I think all of my writer friends that I talk to, we all say that like this thing of really enjoying writing and really enjoying being a writer, we wouldn't wish on our worst enemies. Because I saw this thing on Instagram that was like being a writer is like a reverse bell graph or whatever, where like you start really happy, you have this great idea, and then you start working on it and like get more and more mad at yourself and like depressed at how dumb this idea is and you hate it. And then you like hit your rock bottom and then you like figure it out and you're like, oh, it could work like this. And slowly, as you build up more work momentum, you feel prouder and happier at yourself until you finish. And it's this euphoria of like, I fucking did it. I finished my pilot. I'm so smart. Look at me go. When someone reads it and they're like, oh, this is good, there is no better feeling in this world, honestly.
Is that also though really scary to get that feedback? Do you have a community that you can go to ask for feedback on the things that you're working on?
Yeah, no, I have my friends here in LA I have friends who are writers. I have a friend who works in development. I have these people who are my friends, but I still feel so scared to send them things. My friend who works in development is one of my closest friends in LA. And when I sent it to him, I was like, you're not allowed to think I'm stupid after you read this, which is crazy because we've been friends a long time. He knows I'm not a stupid person. You just like, it's this imposter syndrome of I shouldn't be allowed to do it. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I like stumbled my way in here, which is not true. I worked so hard to get here, but it's like that feeling of someone else is probably better. Why me? You know?
Yeah. No, I completely get that. Do you ever face writer's block either when you're on a show or off? And how do you combat that?
All the time. Yes. On the show, it's easier to combat it because as a room, you've kind of agreed on like the beats of the story. You kind of know what's going to happen and you're just fleshing it out and giving it life and like finding fun ways into scenes. And like that feels more fun. I think the part that feels really hard for me is beating out the story and coming up with the actual like story moves that make sense and don't feel obvious. And like to me, the dialogue is sometimes the fun part. So and it's easier once you know what you're saying to like write it, you know? At work, that's done as a collective. So that makes it so much easier. In private, I mean, this last pilot I wrote, I started during the writer's strike and then I went back to work. So I'm giving myself grace in that, but I only just finished it a year later. So I'm kind of like, it takes a long time and sometimes you feel really dumb, but then when you're done, you're a fucking rock star. And that's awesome.
Absolutely. How do you find the stories that you want to write about? Are you taking from your own life? Are you kind of just dreaming them up? What stories do you want to tell?
That's a good question. This most recent one is very personal. I think it's, you know, the trope of write what you know. I think that is true. So this most recent one, I also felt like I was going out with this as like a new sample for representation. By the way, agents, if you're listening, hit me up. So I wanted it to feel like a personal essay and a script. But in general, I find I like telling like female coming of age stories. That's what I spark to the most. So like kind of the shows like Never Have I Ever, I thought was so great. And I just enjoyed watching it so much. Or like Sex Lives of College Girls, like that whole like girls figuring out themselves and life and what's going on. Because I think maybe that's something, even though I'm 33, I still feel very young, that I identify with a lot and like makes my brain synapses fire or whatever. So usually it's something around that. And then it's just kind of, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this would be a good idea.
I want to touch upon your assistant experience. You have mentioned you were an assistant, you were a writer's assistant. What is the role of a writer's assistant?
Everything.
Everything.
They're like just like one of the most underappreciated people in the industry. Writer's assistants are amazing. So, okay, writer's assistants. The basic job is all day writers sit in a room and pitch and talk about like what could happen in the story. And the writer's assistant's job is to just type as fast as they can and keep up with the conversation. Different showrunners like notes different ways. Some showrunners like you to say who said each thing, which I think is wild. Luckily, mine never did. But then when the workday is done and you've been typing all day, the second part of your job starts, which is you go through the minutes of the day and you try to clean them up and organize them into a way that's helpful for writers the next day. So usually I would organize it into like, if we were speaking more broadly, I'd organize it into like, here's where we talked about our A character. Here's where we talked about our B character. Here's where we talked about this potential work story that could happen. It's kind of like creating a study guide for them every night, but you work all day and then I'd always be up to like 2 a.m. doing it because I'd need a break to like eat dinner and say hello to my boyfriend. And then I would start again at 8 o'clock, which maybe is stupid, but it's how it worked for me. And then I'd be up to like 2 a.m. doing it. And then you like wake up and do it all again the next day. So it's incredibly helpful. The room could not function without this person, but you get paid an assistant wage and you work like 20-hour days less, but intense days, you know? So writer's assistants are the real heroes.
Do you record the writer's room? Are you allowed to do that? Or is it truly just like based off like what you hear? What happens if you miss something?
These are great questions. So recording, it depends on the showrunner. If you get permission from them, totally. Why not? Right? I never did. But there are writers assistants who do. Some of them don't tell their showrunners and just do it for themselves. And then if they miss something, they'll say like time code, blah, 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 and then go
Yeah.
back into the recording for themselves. I had a friend who did that. I never did. I was too anxious. I am a woman with anxiety, LOL. But true. But yeah, you're kind of just typing as fast as you can. Sometimes if you miss things, I would like text writers on the side and be like, what was that? And if they didn't know, then usually the conversation would circle around back that way. So like, oh, and like that thing we said about this character doing X, Y, and Z thing, and you catch it sometimes the second time if
Yeah.
nobody else was paying attention. But usually like writers, like in my room, the writer's assistant before me was in the room as a staff writer. And so I would text them a lot because I knew that they knew I was in the trenches and they would understand.
Yeah, absolutely. You were a writer's assistant on many different shows, but like did your like responsibilities ever grow while you were a writer's assistant? Or did you like gain confidence to, you mentioned that one of your ideas that you pitched got on, like did it take a while to gain that confidence? Like, is there anything that changes between the start of you being a writer's assistant and the moment before you get promoted?
It does depend a lot on the showrunner. Like some showrunners never promote. I'm so grateful and appreciative mine does, you know? I think it builds loyalty in your staff too. I think more showrunners should. But I do think some of my responsibilities grew because when I started, I was purely notes. That's it. But then as I went on and I got more comfortable with the notes, you know, I remember one day we were talking about the episode in the room and my boss goes, hey, can you do my beat sheet for me? Like just do it tonight and send it to me tomorrow. So it was a really good opportunity to prove that I could do the beat sheet. Or like, you know, I remember we were on this one show and they needed a bio. The characters were going to like an art gallery or something and they needed a bio for the artist. And my boss was like, do you want to write the bio for the artist? So I wrote the bio for the artist. And then like the next day, the bio was like 6 feet tall on a wall of this gallery. And it was like such a pinch me writers have power moment. So I think like I was given more opportunities to show little writing things like that. Or like there was an episode with a wedding and I got to write what the preacher said, like the vow, you know what I mean? Little moments like that where you get a little more responsibility.
How would you suggest that a writer's assistant position themselves so that they can get those responsibilities given to them and then ultimately get promoted, hopefully, if your showrunner does that?
So I would say it's two main things. One, make sure you're doing the job that you're assigned to the best of your ability. No matter how smart you are, if the notes aren't on point, if the showrunner feels like you're not paying attention, or if you are paying attention, which is worse, but you're not understanding how it works or what they're gearing towards, it makes them think that you're not capable of like understanding what's going on in a writer's room. So first and foremost, like keep the notes tight. Make sure that you're doing the job you're being paid for very well. Once you're doing that, you know, you could always, what I did and what I was taught to do is like when the showrunner is out of the room, if you have like a writer or two you're close with or trust and you have a good idea, you can pitch it to them on the side. And then when the showrunner comes back to the room, that writer, if they're like in your corner and nice, will say, you know, Liz actually had a really good idea about that. And then they'll kind of like give you the floor in an appropriate way that doesn't feel like you just pitched out of nowhere and like feels jarring. It feels like you were alley-oop to do so.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I would like, if I was reading a script and I had like a cool joke pitch, I would email the writer of that episode and be like, hey, I have a joke pitch. And if they liked it, they'd like forward it to the boss and say, oh, you know, Liz pitched me this joke. I think it works really well. And then slowly the boss starts to realize that like you are more than just someone typing, like you are a smart person with good ideas.
Yeah, that's really great advice. How did your responsibilities as a writer's assistant change? Because you go to set as a writer's assistant. Oh, do you go to set as a writer's assistant?
You don't as a writer's assistant. I was a hybrid writer's assistant and script coordinator.
Right.
So script coordinators sometimes do go to set. Yeah.
What's the difference between those two roles and why does a script coordinator get to go to set?
So the writer's assistant focuses mainly just on the writer's room and taking those notes and cleaning them up, that whole like shebang, whatever. The script coordinator, when you make script revisions, their job is to, you know, keep the different script files and make sure it's all formatted correctly and track the changes and read through continuity stuff. So like if you've changed the draft so that a character was at a party and then you've decided they shouldn't be at that party, if you cut back into the party and it says like Gwen dances in the background, but Gwen's no longer in the scene, like they would flag something like that for the writer. So it's kind of like they're the last line of defense to make sure the script is perfect and makes sense and like has all the elements it needs, and they track what all the changes are.
Is there anything that you feel like you did as a script coordinator or as a writer's assistant that helped you build your skill as a writer and helped you, do the work that you do now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think both help a lot. So as a writer's assistant, you're like there hearing how writers talk about story all the time and like hearing how they pitch, hearing how they think, and that informs your own skill set. And then on top of that, when you're cleaning up the notes, a lot of time when you're getting closer to the episode, your notes really are the beat sheet for the episode. So you get used to like putting the story together in order and how it's supposed to be. And that's such a great skill to have and learn to flex and like to know how to do a beat sheet. Like when I turned in my first beat sheet for the show, it read how a beat sheet was supposed to read. I didn't seem so green, you know? And
Yeah.
then with a script coordinator, you're reading every script that comes through so many times. And like the best way to understand what good dialogue is or like how a script is supposed to read is by reading scripts. And you're doing it all the time, over and over, like exhaustively. So you get really accustomed to like, this is the anatomy of a script. This is how it's supposed to look and read and feel, which is so helpful.
Thank you guys so much for listening so far. If you are enjoying this episode, please spread the word of what's next. Text, Insta DM, email, carrier pigeon, whatever method floats your boat, but please share the link to this episode or any of my episodes for that matter with anyone you think might be interested. I am trying to grow a business here and word of mouth is the best way to promote, so any help would be much appreciated. You guys are the best. I now want to turn to your journey to being a writer's assistant, script coordinator, writer. You, before writer's assistant, had so many non-writing related jobs. I completely forgot you were a page, you were an office PA. Do you feel like you always knew that that was a useful path to be on?
That's a good question. I do think that like, a quote my mom always says is that you are the sum total of your experiences. So I do think I picked up something from each job that helped me with the next. So like being an NBC page didn't like, I wouldn't say anything I learned necessarily in the page program was like paramount to me being a writer. That's not true. But when I was on assignment in the page program, I met a guy who knew a producer who was looking for PAs, and I really wanted to get into scripted. So because I was friends with this guy through just like being a nice kid and a hard worker, he sent my resume over to this producer who was looking for an assistant and was like, you have no scripted experience, but you can be an office PA if you'd like. And I was like, absolutely, I'll do it. And then via being an office PA, I learned how to be a good PA. So when I had a shot at being a writer's PA, I was already a good PA. And so I like impressed them. And then they were like, you're a nice kid. We'll give you an opportunity to try being a writer's assistant. And you know what I mean? So it's like each thing helped me get to the next level in a way, even if it wasn't how I thought it would. It was always geared towards me being a writer. Do you know what I mean? Like in my mind, I was always like, the goal is to be a TV writer and I'm going to figure out how to do it. And I'm going to like try to chess piece my way and plan my moves in that direction. And a lot of people do. And some people never get there. I was incredibly lucky to like get linked up with my boss when I did. It was definitely like partially really hard work and partially right place, right time. And I think that's true for a lot of people.
When did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
College, maybe. I went to college thinking I wanted to be a news anchor, which is hilarious to think about now.
But you would be like, a great news anchor.
Oh my God, no. You're very nice to say that. Could never be me. News anchors are amazing. I just like, what? But but I got to college and I got into the communication school at the college, and they make you take like a general comm class to start. And they kind of talk about like all the different ways you can go. And I was like, oh my God, TV writing is a job. That's amazing. I should do that. Because I always wanted to have like a really fun job. And that seemed like the most fun job, which it is. It like absolutely is the most fun job.
Is there just an experience that you are really grateful for that you've had and think has helped you in your journey?
Oh my God, like every day. Yeah. An experience in particular. I do think the page program was helpful for certain things, like, learning how to ask for informationals or like learning how to do the customer service thing. A specific experience, I'm not sure. I think getting onto that first show with my showrunner, where
Yeah.
I was an office PA and I was like, God, another office PA job. I don't want to do this job. Like I was so disheartened. But taking that job that I didn't want to take because I wanted to like move on to the next level ended up being the greatest thing ever because I met my showrunner who I've been with now for 7 years. You know what I mean? And has like met me as an office PA and now I'm about to be a story editor. Crazy. So I think, yeah, taking that job was an experience I'm grateful for.
So talk me through your office PA experiences in general. Like, how did you find each of your next jobs and roles? Like, that must have been kind of stressful. Like, these are essentially freelance positions. So, like, there's always an end date. How did you navigate that?
After my first one, I was petrified because it was my first job. I didn't really have a network of people yet. So I was kind of like, well, what am I going to do? So I begged my boss, who I hated, not my current showrunner, just want to clarify that. She was a production coordinator who was so mean, but I begged her to go on the next job with her because I just wanted certainty. And she was like, I'm going to take some time off, but I will recommend you to my friend who's a showrunner or who's a production coordinator, rather. And I was like, okay. So she recommended me to the next production coordinator who was great, not a great worker, but a very friendly person. So I enjoyed working with this person more. And then that person, after the pilot I was working on with them, went on to a different show that I went on with them. And then a friend I had made got me onto another show. It just was like you slowly build your network and people are always looking for good PAs. So if you work hard and you're a good PA, you'll like make your rounds. And but finding the next one after the first one was scary.
How did you make an impression on your showrunner when you were just an office PA on his
Oh,
show?
this was a good one. This is a moment I'm proud of. So I was working on this show, and it was me and one other office PA who actually to this day is a very good friend of mine. And she wanted to be a producer, and I wanted to be a writer. And my showrunner took all of his writers with him to New York, which was super rare. That never happened. So this was like the most interaction I'd ever had with writers. So I turned to this other office PA and I was like, let's make a deal. If the producers come to us and ask for something, you should be the one to do it and you get in good with them. If the writers come and ask us for something, let me do it and then I'll get in good with them. And we were like, she was happy, I was happy, great deal. So I would be the one to get the lunches for the writers every day. I would make their photocopies. I would do all the things, and they got to know me a little bit. So finally, one day, the writer's assistant at the time, who now is a co-EP on the show I'm working on, so great mentor to have,
Yeah.
was setting up the room. And I came in and I was like, can I help you set up the writer's room today? And he was like, absolutely. And I said, listen, I've really enjoyed working with you guys. I want to be a writer. Is there any way I could be your PA next season? What do I have to do? And he was like, we actually hated our PA this season and you've been really nice and helpful. And like, people are getting a good vibe from you. So I'll connect you with this person. So they connected me not with the showrunner, but the second in command who I spoke to. I was so nervous. I sounded like such a dweeb. I was like, I just think writing is the best job in the world. I was like, so weird, but it's fine. I mean, whatever. Then she kind of did the sniff test on me a little bit. And despite how I came across, said I wasn't weird. And then they allowed me to like set up an interview with my showrunner.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was so weird and bad in the interview, but he hired me.
So it really does pay to kind of tell people what you want, because I feel like sometimes in the entertainment industry, you're often advised not to tell people what you want because they'll like get freaked out or things like that. But in your case, it worked out.
I'll say this. Every promotion I have ever gotten in my life has been because I've asked for it. And I think there's a way to do it. Like you don't come in guns blazing and say like, give me this promotion. But I think you like build relationships with people and you show people you're smart and a hard worker. And then once you've kind of proven yourself a little bit, then you do ask for what you want. Because I think people, I don't think anyone is going to be like, hey, I have a great opportunity. I wonder if Liz would like it. No one's going to do that to you. You have to like build the relationships and then say, hey, I'm looking for this next opportunity. Do you have any advice? Or is there any way, anything you think I should be doing? That's how I've gotten every promotion I've had.
I mean, and great advice. I'm sure a lot of people will be a lot of people find that very useful. I do want to ask though, when you were doing these office PA jobs and being a writer's PA and writer's assistant, these are obviously, as you said, about working till 2 a.m. while being a writer's assistant. Did you have time to work on the side to do your own projects?
No. Short answer, no. Longer answer is like, all shows have hiatuses. So during the hiatus times, I would try to be productive and like work on things. But there was like a 1.5 year stretch where I had no time off. I was just back to back to back to back shows with my boss. And I didn't really write that much that time. You know, I would try, but you're just so mentally, emotionally, physically exhausted that it's like, I mean, I really commend people who do. I couldn't really do it. But now that I'm in this cycle of like, there are hiatuses and I have time off, it keeps me from getting bummed. I feel like if I had too much unproductive time, I would get really bummed. So it keeps me feeling like I'm still a writer and I'm still productive and I'm still in the mix of things, you know?
It is almost time to wrap up, but I do want to ask a little bit more advice from you for people who are interested in your world. What advice would you have for aspiring writers?
I think I would say stay writing, like keep working on your writing. I would say when you are an assistant or a PA, always be the one who says yes to doing the task. And there are like so many unflattering tasks that they ask you, like menial shit, like going to do the 3rd coffee run or like make another pot of coffee or like restock the closet or organize the supply. Like there's so many of those tasks. And if you're the person who always says yes, or who always like will go that extra effort, people do notice. People notice attitudes. When I was the assistant, the writer's assistant, I was given carte blanche to hire our writer's PA. And like, I always noticed the people who like didn't give me a hard time. And I think it's like, that's really all it is like everyone's job is hard and they're putting their whole focus on it. And they really just want to hire someone who like won't make their jobs or life harder. So if you can be the person who like has a good attitude, makes life easier for people, people will hire you forever.
On that note of doing, you know, kind of the unwanted tasks, what advice would you have for surviving the survival jobs, you know, before getting to the dream job?
Oh God, that's a good question. For me, it was Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Was my survival tactic.
I love that.
So truthfully, there were times where like I was so sick of doing room notes that I was like, I'm going to quit tomorrow. Like I can't do this anymore. And my now fiance, formerly boyfriend, would say, if you do 5 more pages, I'll like go get you some Flamin' Hot Cheetos. And I would be like, I love Flamin' Hot Cheetos. And that was actually a motivator. And then I think it's also my showrunner has a history of promoting. And I always kept that in mind. The 4 writers' assistants before me are all staffed. There's no reason I should be any different. I just have to keep going. There's no reason I'm different. So those 2 things, hope and Cheetos.
That is also adorable that he did that for you. Like what an incredibly supportive partner. I love that.
My God. He used to stay awake with me until like 2 a.m. because he was like, I'll just hang out. And so he would sit and read or be on his laptop or do something. And while I worked and threw temper tantrums regularly.
I mean, there's a reason why he is now your fiance. I love that. Looking back at your career, is there anything that you wish you could tell your younger self?
Oh, so much. Don't panic. It's going to be okay. It'll all be fine. I think I can't stop myself. I give a lot of fucks all the time and I can't not.
Yeah.
And not saying don't give a fuck, but like, don't think you're going to like everything is so life and death because ultimately this is TV and it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, like no one's going to die. It's fine.
It's not brain surgery, as I used to tell myself when I was an assistant.
Yeah. Like ultimately this is just for fun. And it's it's competitive because it is a great job and so many people want it. So like, don't take it lightly, but like, don't panic. It's fine.
Yeah. That's great advice. Final question for you, Liz. What's next?
Oh my God, such a good question. So right now, what's next for me is I'm seeking representation, which I've got a lead or two. I'm seeing what's gonna happen, got some fires going.
It's gonna happen. I like know it with absolute certainty.
God, I hope so from your lips. But so that is my next step, is finding a rep. And then we've got another season of my show coming up. I guess I'll start writing on my next, now that I finished this pilot, I should start thinking about what my next one is. Yeah, kind of those are the biggies. Getting married in less than a month. That's what's next for me.
Gosh, so much exciting stuff is coming your way.
I can't even. It's a lot in a happy way, you know?
In a very, very happy way. I mean, yeah, like you said at the top of this, like, it's all worth it. All those.
It's all worth it.
Coffee trips, lunch trips, being yelled at, which I'm sure in your time has happened. Like, it's all worth it and coming to fruition now because you've put in the hard work and you've kept going.
I will say, though, if there's anything else you can imagine yourself being happy doing, do it, because this is incredibly thankless for a very long time until it's not. So it's like, if you really want this, don't come up with a plan B because you'll use it when it gets hard. Or if there's something else you like doing, do that because it's probably easier.
Yeah. Well, Liz, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your career.
Thanks for having me.
This has been so much fun, and I can't wait to see all the exciting things to come out of that incredible brain of yours.
Oh, God, you give me so much credit. Thank you.
Well-deserved credit. That is definitely well-deserved.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to listen to your podcast and have it win an Emmy or something. I don't know what podcasts win, but it'll win that award.
You know, I really should have the answer to that as well. Like, podcast, the poddies? I don't know.
The potties? I can't wait till you go to the potty.
I really should know that. I should know that. But let's just get some more listeners to start with, and then we'll think about all the great awards this will win.
I love it. Okay. A Peabody, probably? I don't know.
Let's go with that. I love it. All right. Thank you.
Of course.